Imagine a sea of grass, right? Just stretching as far as the eye can see. And thundering across it, these legendary mounted warriors, absolute masters of the bow, who just dominated the Eurasian steppe for centuries. They're the Scythians. And for almost 1,000 years, their name was whispered in awe from the Black Sea all the way to the borders of China. It meant power, incredible art, and a really fierce independence. But just when you think you've got them pegged as simple warriors, the old Greek historian Herodotus throws us a total curveball. He describes them taking vapor baths with, get this, hemp, and shouting for joy in the steam. This one little detail tells you there's way more to the Scythians than just their skill on the battlefield. So, that's the puzzle, isn't it? Our picture of the Scythians is this wild mosaic, pieced together from what their enemies wrote about them and the absolutely incredible treasures they left behind in their tombs. So let's dive in and try to uncover the real story behind the legends. You know, to really get the Scythians, you have to start with how they saw themselves. Their own origin stories are just as epic as their conquests. But what does the hard evidence, the archaeology, actually tell us? Okay, so according to their foundational myth, their whole society was basically divinely ordered from the heavens. A god's son as three of his own sons, and then bam, three golden objects fall out of the sky. But only the youngest, a guy named Coluxis, could actually handle the flaming gold. It's a brilliant way to explain their world. The plow for the farmers, the axe for the warriors, and the cup for the priests, with one single king chosen by the gods to rule them all. All right, so that's the story they told. But how do archaeologists today know they've found a Scythian site? Well, they look for this, the Scythian triad. Think of it as their cultural fingerprint. You've got the weapons, the special horse gear, and that iconic animal-style art. And it makes perfect sense, right? These three things were everything to them: weapons for power, horse gear for mobility, and the art that connected them to the wild spirit of the steppe. And we see this triad appearing way, way back in the 9th century BCE, in these elaborate burial mounds they built called kurgans. From that heartland, their culture just exploded across the grasslands. By the 4th century BCE, they were a genuine superpower, even controlling the grain trade that was feeding ancient Greece. But, like all great empires, their time at the top couldn't last forever. When you hear the word Scythian, your brain probably jumps straight to warrior. I mean, their military genius was legendary, and it terrified settled empires. But some recent discoveries are making us totally rethink who these warriors actually were. Their secret weapon, their game changer, was perfecting mounted archery. Just try to imagine it. A storm of arrows raining down on you from a fast-moving cavalry that could strike and then just vanish before you could even think about forming a defensive line. This tactic made them the undisputed kings of the open steppe. But here is where the story takes a fascinating turn. Archaeologists digging in the burial mounds of the Sarmatians, who are very closely related to the Scythians, found something stunning. They discovered that up to 25% of all the graves that contained military weapons belonged to women. Yeah, you heard that right. 1 in every 4 warriors. And we're not talking about ceremonial daggers here. These women were buried with their bows, their arrows, their swords, the actual tools of their trade. This is an incredible discovery because it strongly suggests the Greek myths of the fearsome Amazon warrior women, well, they weren't just myths. They were probably based on these very real, very formidable women of the steppe. And the Scythian story just keeps getting more complex. This was a culture of incredible, stark contrasts. On one hand, Herodotus describes rituals that are, frankly, shockingly brutal. But on the other hand, their tombs have revealed an artistic vision and skill that is just absolutely breathtaking. And a little warning, this gets pretty grim. Herodotus tells us that a Scythian warrior would drink the blood of the first enemy he killed. They'd collect heads to prove their kills and get their share of the loot. They used scalps as napkins and even made quiver covers from the skin of their enemies' right arms. It's a brutal, visceral look into their warrior code. But here's the paradox, the part that's hard to wrap your head around. How do you square that savage ferocity with what else we find? Because these same people, the ones with these gruesome customs, were also creating some of the most sophisticated and beautiful art in the entire ancient world. It's all thanks to their kurgans, those frozen tombs that acted like perfect time capsules. And this dedication to art was literally written on their skin. The Pazyryk ice mummies are a perfect example. Their bodies covered in these incredibly detailed tattoos. Get this, analysis of one woman shows she was tattooed by 2 different artists. You can see the difference here. The right arm is a masterpiece done by a real pro. The left arm is simpler, maybe done by an apprentice. This tells us that tattooing wasn't just some casual thing. It was a valued, developed craft. So, if they were so powerful, so dominant, what happened? Where did they all go? Well, the answer, as it so often did on the steppe, came galloping in from the east. You can actually see the power shift happening over a couple of centuries. The Scythians are at their absolute peak in the 4th century BCE. But by the 2nd century BCE, they're in decline. A new wave of nomads, the Sarmatians, were pushing west, and they eventually challenged and then replaced the Scythians as the new lords of the steppe. But it might not have been just outside pressure. There may have been internal issues too. Herodotus tells this amazing story about a Scythian king named Silas who really admired Greek culture. He'd sneak off, change out of his Scythian clothes, and live like a Greek. But when his own people found out, they revolted and had him executed. That fierce, rigid devotion to their own traditions might have been a strength, but it also might have made it harder for them to adapt to a changing world. So even though their empire faded away and their people were eventually absorbed by new groups, the Scythians were never truly erased from history. In fact, their influence gallops on, echoing right down to our own time. I mean, their legacy is just huge. They completely changed warfare with the mounted bow. Their unique animal-style art influenced cultures across continents. They captured the imagination of the Greeks, which is how we got the enduring myth of the Amazons. And the breathtaking beauty of their gold work, it's still considered some of the finest craftsmanship of the entire ancient world. But all of this leaves us with one final, kind of haunting question. We only know the Scythians through the eyes of their rivals, or through the silent stories told by their art and their bones. They left us no words of their own, so you have to wonder, if they had been the ones writing the histories, how differently would we see them? How different would our entire understanding of the ancient world be if we could have heard it from the lords of the steppe themselves?